Hi, I'm J.W. Stewart, a veteran broadcaster and journalist with nearly 30 years' experience. I've worked at ESPN and NBC, and now I teach at the University of New Haven.
And I'm Sheahon Zenger, Director of Athletics at the University of New Haven. Prior to that, Director of Athletics at the University of Kansas and Illinois State University. The first 15 years of my career, however, was a college football coach and an athletic administrator. This is the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast, brought to you by our presenting sponsor, the Pink Clover Foundation. Thank you for joining us today across all of our social media platforms. And as always, our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Today, our guest is Nick Sakiewicz, who is a UNH grad. He's in our Athletics Hall of Fame as a soccer goalie, but now he's the commissioner of the National Lacrosse League. And Nick has some great stories to tell us. He's in the green room right now, and he'll be out momentarily. Meantime, Dr. Z, we've covered a lot of sports on this podcast so far. This is the first time we've had a chance to talk lacrosse. Are you a lacrosse fan at all?
You're getting me outside my wheelhouse here. I'm a Midwesterner, and before we were visiting with Nick a little bit before we jumped on here, and we were talking about an expansion into Fort Worth, where I lived for a while. And when I moved back to Kansas, lacrosse was starting to encroach from the east into Kansas City, and it's really big there right now. And I've known a few young kids who play it, and I helped a young lacrosse kid go to the Air Force Academy and things like that. But I haven't watched it as much as I would like to. What I have seen appears to be pretty fun, and so I'm here to be educated as anything to Nick.
Yeah. We did not, growing up in Rhode Island, we did not have lacrosse when I was growing up there in the 1980s. When my first taste of lacrosse was going to Marist College, and we did have a lacrosse team, a men's team and a women's team. We have here in the state of Connecticut a professional team, one of the teams that's in Nick's league, the National Lacrosse League, the New England Black Wolves, who play down at Mohegan Sun. I've actually not been to a game in person. I hear they're phenomenal, but when I was to the local NBC affiliate here in Connecticut, we did highlights of their games all the time. And the action, Dr. Z, on TV, the action is just amazing. I can't even imagine what it's like in person. It's got to be 10 times better.
Yeah, I think it moves awfully fast. And I don't know how the guys in your business call a game, really. Much like hockey, there was a famous hockey announcer I saw last night was passed away, and they were giving clips of him and showing clips of him and talking about. So I'm imagining it's kind of the same type of speed.
It is. Yeah, it's a very fast sport. I think probably just as fast as hockey. Maybe you have a little bit more time because the field's a little bit bigger than the hockey rink. But it's a fun sport to play, and a lot of guys who have played hockey have gone on to play lacrosse. And yeah, lacrosse certainly has exploded. We'll talk about that when we bring them out here in just a couple of minutes. But like I said, it's been a neat alternative to other sports. I guess maybe if I had the opportunity to go back, maybe had lacrosse been available way back when, maybe that would have been a sport I tried. I don't know, and I guess we'll have to ask Nick this. Like certain sports, they lend themselves to a certain body type. Football, you tend to be usually bigger and stronger. Basketball, it helps to be tall. I'm curious about lacrosse though. I don't know if lacrosse, if it helps maybe to be smaller and quicker, because that's really how the game's played.
Well, in my conversations with Rob Thompson and John Raba up at Wesleyan, one of our alums, it appears that there's a number of guys who played both lacrosse and football. And Nick, of course, has lacrosse and soccer. And I find that really unique. And it may have to do with, we're asking questions before he's on here, the seasons and what balances well with where I grew up. You played football and baseball, and maybe basketball in between. And I'm guessing it has something to do with that.
Yeah. You mentioned Wesleyan. Wesleyan's maybe their most famous alum, if not one of the most famous alums, is Bill Belichick, coach of the Patriots. Yeah. And Bill Belichick, when he was at Wesleyan, also played lacrosse in addition to football.
I had no idea. Yep. I thought you were setting me up to talk about the Chiefs again, JW.
Well, we're on the subject because the Patriots right now are not worth talking about. But the Chiefs are doing pretty well. How are you? I mean, you got to be thrilled here, defending Super Bowl champs and off to a great start this season, coming off the win against the Bills on that Monday nighter.
Yeah, I'm just laying low. I enjoy watching them, and I love their quarterback, and I love their head coach, and they're the way they go about doing business. And that's what I like about them the most, is I'm partial to people who do things with class, and both the coach and the quarterback do, and that makes me proud.
Yep. They represent the Kansas City very well, and we look forward to a long time. Remember, we had Chris Berman on back in May, and he's very close with Andy Reid, and he's gotten to know Patrick Mahomes, and everyone in the NFL loves Patrick Mahomes. How can you not? He's such a great human being.
Yeah, he is. He is.
All right, well let's get some of these questions answered here, because I'm real curious myself. So let's bring out Nick Sakiewicz. And Nick, as I mentioned, graduated from UNH back in the early 1980s. He's in our Chargers Hall of Fame, not for lacrosse, but for soccer. He was a soccer goalie for us here in West Haven. And, of course, now he's the commissioner of the National Lacrosse League and has been the commish of that league since 2016. Nick joins us now on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. Nick, thanks for being with us. How you doing?
Good, J.W. And Z, great to be here. Great to see you guys.
Yeah. Good to have you. Good to have you. I'm going to let J.W. run point guard on this and get your background, and I'll sit out here and take jump shots when it comes to lacrosse. And just
no worries. Hey, listen, I'm out of my comfort zone too. I'm a lifelong soccer guy, and somehow I found myself as the commissioner of the National Lacrosse League 4 years ago, and here we go. So don't feel bad, Z. I also feel out of my comfort zone.
All right.
Well, that's one of the topics we'll cover. I know, Nick, when we were chatting before we came on the air here, Nick was saying there's a lot to unpack about his story. So I guess maybe the best place to start is at the beginning. Nick, how did you end up going to the University of New Haven?
I was recruited by Dr. Joe and Dr. Joe Macknick at the time. We call him Dr. Joe, was the Olympic team goalkeeper coach. And I had a bunch of offers all over the place to go to school, and scholarship money being thrown at me. And I turned quite a few of them down. And I figured the best chance for me to develop my career was, having the Olympic coach watching me every day and seeing me play every day. And it ended up being the right decision.
Nick might be too modest to say this, so I'll say it for him. We mentioned he's in our Chargers Hall of Fame as a goalie. He's one of the best goalies in school history. He graduated, Nick, 82, right? If I remember correctly off the top of my head, 82
That's
is
right.
when you graduated.
Yeah.
So Nick graduated a while ago, but he still holds some school records. He actually shares the school record for shutouts in a season with 11, but he still holds the school record for fewest goals allowed in a season with 10. Z, he went an entire season allowed 10 goals, and that was it. And in a career, 43 goals. So between you and the coach, I think you guys did very well. What were the teams like back then when you were playing?
They were very good. I'll take the accolades, of course, but I really could never achieve them without the guys in front of me. And I had some amazing soccer players in front of me. And, Division II soccer back then was really the top of the pyramid. We were amongst some of the best teams in the country, both Division I and Division II. Eventually, at that time, Division I schools stopped playing us because it didn't help their cause. And there was a lot of disruption between Division I and Division II soccer after I left. And then the landscape changed. But we played, University of Connecticut, we played Hartwick, we played big Division I schools and beat them usually, and had a very good team. And Dr. Joe and John Kowalski was the assistant coach at the time, and they recruited a lot of us that played in the men's leagues in New Jersey and Connecticut and New England that were really good soccer players. So some of those teams, those players went on to have pretty robust professional careers after they played at UNH.
Nick, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in North Jersey, in a town called Passaic, New Jersey. First generation American. My parents came over from the old country, so I had no choice. I was had a soccer ball at my feet before I could walk.
Nick, I did some reading prior to the interview here, and I was really fascinated by a story you once told about your grandfathers. Would you please tell us the story about your grandfathers?
Which one? Because one of them, my grandfather.
The one who was in the merchant marine or the navy.
Yeah, my
was the
mom's
one that
dad.
caught my eye.
Yeah, so my mom's dad was a Polish merchant marine up in the north of Poland. Very cold water, very cold place. And as the story goes, my mom and my aunt and my grandmother were in the village that they lived in. Gdynia is the name of the town. And my grandfather, he was in the Polish underground during World War II, and as the Germans were attempting to cross the river into Poland to invade, my grandfather Bruno was in charge of blowing the bridges up to keep the Germans back. But obviously, I don't think he blew up enough bridges, and the Germans got in, and my grandfather raced back to the village and grabbed my mom and my aunt and my grandmother, and eventually found their way walking and hitchhiking on some trains to Austria, eventually Italy, and then came to the United States that way. So they know adversity, or they knew adversity. They're all passed away. But when I look at the kids today, they have no idea what adversity is.
That's well said. And we're always preaching in our business about adversity and general differences, but escaping through the cover of darkness with a suitcase or two through several countries to come to the new land is, talk about starting over. That's,
And Z, what's amazing about them growing up? I mean, obviously I didn't experience that. I was born here, but listening to them talk over the years about that experience, like it was, that's what we did. That's what we had to do. Okay, get on with it. And they all came here. They all had incredibly successful lives. My father became a doctor. He has a similar story, but he escaped through Austria. And they just talked at the dinner table in a very matter-of-fact way. Like, what'd you expect us to do? Of course we got away. Of course we beat the Nazis. My aunt, later on in life, got so upset that she got kicked out of her country that she went back. She went back and was like, they're not going to keep me out of my country.
That's classic. Wow.
Nick, many years later, after you graduated the University of New Haven, you actually went overseas to play soccer. What countries were you in, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was really awesome, and I would have never had that opportunity if I hadn't played soccer with a French teammate by the name of Denis Vandenbreek, also a UNH alum. Set me up on a trial with a big club in Nantes, France, and I'd signed a developmental contract there as a young 22-year-old goalie. That was in '83. The '84 World Cup came. I got displaced because of some rule changes. That club sold my contract to a team in Lisbon, Portugal. So I went to Lisbon as a full pro. Met my wife there. It was awesome. Didn't make any money playing soccer, but met a wife of many years. And that was really good. And then came back to the United States, played for Joe indoors the one season in '86, and then finished my career with the Tampa Bay Rowdies in Florida and retired in '89. But it was great experience in Europe. I mean, at the time, many American players couldn't play in the North American Soccer League because it was mostly all foreign players. So many of us went overseas to try to find jobs. And goalkeeping was a pretty specialized position, and I had a pretty good shot at it. And I wasn't too bad a player, and I ended up, being able to sign a professional contract over there. Didn't last too long because Eastern Europe opened up, and all the great goalkeepers came from Eastern Europe. But it was a thrilling experience. It was, probably the best 3 years of my life.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've heard many stories like that. That one is that's pretty unique. Especially you're talking about Eastern Europe opening up, and we've covered the Nazis, and the students watching this are taking notes. They can go back and hopefully they don't just Google it. They actually get a real encyclopedia or something to check this.
Lots of geopolitics, I guess, in there, Z, and it was really interesting. And you could imagine in 1983, an American kid with a really tough Polish last name in France, trying to play for one of the top first division clubs. It was tough. The early days were really tough of that, but my teammates were awesome. It was really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Nick, you say that you quote unquote retired in 1989, but I mean maybe from playing you've retired, but certainly,
90.
yeah, 1990. You've worked very hard ever since. How did you? Because you're one of the founding fathers, basically, of MLS. How did you get involved with that, and what was your job there with the MLS when they first began?
I became the first vice president of sponsor sales in 1995. I was at the time living in San Francisco in the Bay Area. I was working downtown for a credit card bank. We were a large MasterCard issuer. And when the 94 World Cup came, I mean, I was a fan. I was involved. My boss was on the board of MasterCard, and we went to a lot of games. And I knew a lot of people, ex-teammates and administrators from U.S. Soccer. So I got re-engaged and reconnected with them. And then after that World Cup, I got a call one day from the senior vice president of U.S. Soccer, which was at the time managing, finishing up, closing up the World Cup and closing the books on the World Cup. And he asked me if I could help bring MasterCard in as a sponsor for Major League Soccer. And I was, of course, a soccer guy, and I wanted to help. And I made some introductions, and eventually we got MasterCard into the league as a sponsor. But I did that all pro bono. I was just working at I was working at a credit card bank, and doing quite well. And then after we got the deal done, this was over about a 6-month period. After we ended up getting the deal done and MLS announced MasterCard, I got a call from the president of U.S. Soccer, Alan Rothenberg, who said, we could use some guys like you to help us start the league. And I was like, nah, I've got married, I have a new son, and I want to make lots of money, and I'm working in the credit card business, making lots of money. I don't think so. And I still have some uncashed paychecks from failed American soccer leagues in my trophy book. So, but then he invited me down to a meeting in Los Angeles, and in a room. This was like the spring of '95, and in the room was Robert Kraft, Phil Anschutz, and Lamar Hunt, the late Lamar Hunt, John Kluge, who was one of the original owners. And I spent the day with them talking about what cities they want to put teams in, what venues they want to put teams in. And I left that meeting, flew back up to San Francisco, and spoke with my wife. And I was like, this is going to be a very different league. These guys aren't messing around. And I made the jump. I became, in the summer of '95, I became the first vice president of sponsor sales for Major League Soccer. And myself, and I think we were about 8-9 other executives, launched the league in 1996 was our inaugural season, a year later.
Those were some heavy hitters you just named off.
Yeah, they were. That was the difference. They weren't the tracksuit guys running around in leagues that I was playing in the 80s. They were very serious businessmen that had a deep passion to create a league for American players. And I was a player that had to leave my country to play in a league because there were too many foreign players. So I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I wanted to create a legacy of a league for American players.
Yeah.
Could you have foreseen back then, Nick, that the MLS would be where it is today?
I did. We really believed in it. And there were some really tough years. I'd say the first 10 years or so between 95 and 2005, it was tough sledding. I mean, we lost a couple of teams along the way. We had a financial meltdown in technology in the late 90s. We had 9/11 in 2001. There were a lot of hurdles to overcome, and it was tough sledding, no doubt, the first 10 years. But we always knew there was this bubble up. The kids that I played in front of in Tampa in 1989 and 90, that were in their 10, 11, 12 years old, those kids are in their 40s today. And they grew up on the Rowdies, and they grew up on American soccer. And some of them are making a lot of money and spending it on jerseys and season tickets and going to Atlanta United games or, New England Revolution games. And we always knew that it was a maturation, and I learned a lot about the socioeconomic driver of professional sports. And guess what? It's deja vu all over again in the NLL. Lacrosse is exactly where soccer was in the 80s. It's a bubble up sport. Kids and girls and boys, men and women are playing it. And in 20 years, the National Lacrosse League is going to be a 30-team league with a lot of kids that are now going to be adults in 20 years.
Nick, you made my brain went in two different directions there. One, I could not have imagined on this podcast ever foreseen a time I would talk about Sporting KC, which is an MLS team in Kansas City, and the owner is a good friend of mine, and pulled me into that world. And so you were there at the beginning, and really, to me, Sporting KC in that stadium, which at one time was voted the Stadium of the Year, is how far that must have come. That thing had more technology in it. I was using that as a pattern for a facility that I was looking at doing, or becoming involved in. The high tech, the high touch, and they have like 8 different areas, depend on what your fan level is or what you're interested in. You go in this corner over here where you can have high-end lobster and steaks and beverages. You go over here and you've got the crazies in the corner end zone, and literally, J.W., it's amazing. It's like 8 stadiums in one, and everything where you are by your cell phone at all times, and they can bring things to you. And so, imagine your first meeting with Anschutz and Kraft and those guys, and decades later, that's where it is. And now here you are, starting over again. And where my brain went in the other direction is, we all follow certain patterns in our lives. It seems like I get the same kind of job over and over and over again, and it looks like you do too.
Yeah.
I guess
Not by design, Z. Not by design.
Yeah.
Well, there's a saying, you can't schedule opportunity, and a lot of people think like, well, I have a once in a lifetime shot. And when I joined Major League Soccer, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we built a once in a lifetime opportunity. And then after I sold my interest in the Philadelphia Union and left, along came the NLL and have a similar opportunity, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity again. It's deja vu. So yeah, it's you can't schedule opportunity, and when it shows itself, you usually got a hard decision to make and one shot to make that decision. So the NLL showed itself. I took it, and we've been having a blast the last 4 years.
Yeah, Nick, I'm curious, how did that opportunity present itself? Here you are, you're a soccer player at the University of New Haven, soccer player overseas, involved as a founding father of MLS and the Union, and you build soccer stadiums in New York and Philadelphia, and it's soccer, soccer, soccer. How all of a sudden did your life kind of go this way into lacrosse?
Well, it was 21 years in MLS, and it was, 2 soccer stadiums, 3 teams, revitalized the New York team, created the Philadelphia team from a blank sheet of paper. It was pretty much, that was it. And it was 21 years of really tough work. And thank God, I have a family like I have that puts up with my craziness. But I was tired. I was tired after 21 years. It was a slog. And I had the opportunity to get out, in a pretty good situation. And I took that opportunity, and I said to myself, and my family, I'm just going to take a break. Well, sure enough, like the day after it's announced that I'm leaving the club, my phone rings by some local guys who actually own the New England Black Wolves, but they live in Philadelphia. And it was literally the next day. So I didn't have a chance to even breathe. I was still doing interviews about my exit in Philadelphia. And they were like, hey, we happen to be looking for a commissioner, and we followed what you've done in soccer, and we'd really like to talk to you. And I was like, no thanks. I'm taking a break. But again, over about a 3-month period, they kept talking to me. They invited me to games. I looked under the hood of the National Lacrosse League. It looked at a 30-team league with amazing ownership like Stan Kroenke and Terry and Kim Pagula, and NHL teams and NFL teams that own National Lacrosse League teams. And after about 3 months, I said, I gotta do this, because it's another once in a lifetime opportunity of an undermarketed sport and league that hasn't really, it survived 30 years, but they haven't done anything. So I decided, what the hell, I'm too young to retire, and and I took it on. So that's how it happened. That's literally how it happened.
I always thought the title commissioner was a pretty cool title. So, I've had a few friends who are commissioners of college conferences. I always call them the commission. I know J.W. called you that earlier. So,
I didn't do it for the title, Z. Trust me. I still am. I'm a team guy. I was a team guy when I was an athlete, and I always managed teams mostly, except for the first year of the startup of MLS. So I'm still having a hard time with the commission title.
with Nick, with all your background in soccer, did you ever get a chance to play lacrosse? Like, had you ever picked up a lacrosse stick before becoming the commish?
Never. I mean, I'm hardcore soccer. I mean, I'm the guy who, is up at 6 a.m. getting ready for Premier League games on Saturday morning, and both my sons are as well. And soccer was my only game. I mean, I barely followed other sports over my career. Lacrosse was completely alien to me. Actually, New Haven had just started a lacrosse program as I was leaving, and I saw some of those guys, and I remember them being big, strong, and there is a lot of crossover, by the way, with football players and lacrosse players. Like, a lot of the guys that played in our league played college football, but didn't go to the NFL, but decided to play professional lacrosse. So a lot of crossover there, a lot of crossover with hockey. And I remember seeing what a lacrosse stick looked like, but never touched one until I became commissioner of the National Lacrosse League.
Would you have been a lacrosse goalie had you played just like you were a soccer goalie?
Hell no. Now, knowing what those guys face, 120-mile-an-hour shots with a hard red ball, no chance. I mean, I thought diving around a soccer net was a lot of work and very risky. Our goalies are amazing and very rare. Good goalies are very rare in lacrosse. So no, I wouldn't. I would have been an offensive player, I think. Ambidextrous. I'm good with my left and my right. So I would have been a forward or goal scorer, an O guy. They call them the O guys, offense.
Nick, I got to ask you, because you hit it just a couple of minutes ago, that the NLL has been around for a long time. Many people don't realize how long it's been around, yet it doesn't get the pub of a lot of other leagues. Mm-hmm. What do you want people to know about the National Lacrosse League? Because you guys have franchises all over the United States and Canada.
Yeah, we have 14 franchises now. Greg Bibb in Fort Worth is our 14th. We've got on deck Team 15. So we'll have, soon we'll have 10 teams in the U.S., 5 in Canada. It's been around a long time, probably the most grossly undermarketed and underdeveloped at the league level. The teams over the years, some of them have done a very good job making a nice business in their home markets, but the league never had a strategic platform. They never had, a broadcast strategy or an expansion strategy or marketing. And in today's world, you got to be really good at digital marketing and speak to a whole new audience of sports consumers and Gen Z and millennials. They speak a different language than we did. It wasn't, we just bought tickets and went to football games or soccer games or whatever and sat in the stands and had our hot dog and a beer and we were happy. This new consumer, they want to be in the game. They don't want to just buy a ticket. They want to be like on the sidelines and in the game, and it's a whole different world. So undermarketed and but survived for 30 years. So when I came in, I kind of saw that this was an amazing game. It's 25 to 30 goals a game. There's 80 to 100 shots on goal. It's 2 hours, like your head is going this way almost constantly for 2 hours. There's music during the run of play. There's high energy and it's electric. And when I first saw my first game, when those guys from Philly took me to my first game, it was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I stood behind the goal. There's about 4,000 people in the arena. And I saw these world-class athletes doing these things with a stick that was skillful, and big dudes with skill and poise and athleticism. And I looked at one of the guys, Mike French, who's the owner. And I was like, where have you guys been for 30 years? This is unbelievable. Like, a hardcore soccer guy comes here and is electrified by this product on the field. Where have you been? And they didn't expose the league. They didn't market the league. They didn't use the tactics and strategies that they should have been using over 30 years to dynamically expose the league in a big way. And we've been doing that for 4 years. And we've had a little bit of a hockey stick uptick in terms of number of teams, attendance, sponsorship, media contracts, and it's just early days.
You know, how cool is that to be in the year 2020 and you're in the middle of something that's historically still fresh and growing. And it just, you know, so often, this sounds like a crazy notion, but when I was younger, I think a little bit of a foodie that comes out on this show a lot. You know, when are you ever going to have I remember thinking, if I eaten all the good foods there are, what's out there, what's left, or what great books are left, what great movies are left, and you're kind of living that, you know, in an odd way.
Yeah.
You know, kind of a modern day retro experience. I wake up earlier and earlier. I think it comes with growing a little older, and
Same here, Z.
around 4:30, I don't want to wake my wife up, so I'm hanging out in this little TV room, and I'm tired of watching sitcoms. So I've been ordering up free movies, and this morning I was watching Leatherheads, which is a George Clooney spoof on old-time pro football when they were and, you know, trying to get going. It's amazing. We're having this conversation today. Otherwise, I never would have visited about that either. But as you grow and as you become the new MLS, you'll lose some of that retro, you know, my own kids, you know, when they go to buy a shirt, man, if they can find a lacrosse shirt, that's something that's considered really cool, you know. When you become mainstream, you lose a little bit of that, but you want to become mainstream. That's
a good point. There's a lesson in that, and you've always got to be reinventing yourself for the next consumer, the next generation. You got to be thinking. That's the one thing that Lamar Hunt taught me. Lamar was a mentor of mine in the early days of soccer, and Lamar always had the most amazing standard for patience and fortitude. And, you know, he's one of the founding fathers of the NFL. And he said, yeah, it's not a matter of if, but just when soccer is going to pop. And he was investing heavily over many, many years, decades in soccer. And he was right. But it takes patience, and it's socioeconomic, and you got to wait for a whole generation to grow up. And the National Lacrosse League, I'm very excited about it because I see the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation, and our sport is absolutely tailor-made for the short attention spans of both of those groups. Absolutely tailor-made.
totally agree. And, you know, J.W., it all comes back to the Chiefs. You know, we're going full circle here.
Yes.
Hunt and
It always goes back to the Chiefs. Yes, the Hunt family. Right.
you know, what a great family. And, you know, what you experienced with Lamar, I experienced with his son, and a commitment to soccer, but also
Which one? Clark?
No,
Lamar Jr.?
yeah,
Dan?
yeah.
Ed?
You know, they also had a commitment to hockey, and we're trying to get people in that neck of the woods into college hockey, et cetera. And I never understood why a family that was so football oriented cared about the other sports, but that's just who they are.
Yeah. They're community people too. They love their local community. Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned so much from Lamar. It was a great experience, and Phil and Robert, but Lamar was special.
Yeah.
Nick, like every other league out there, you've been hit by COVID. How have you guys dealt with that? And when are you guys coming back to play?
Yeah. So, you know, this is my third global crisis. Only this one's in a pandemic. So 9/11 was the first one, and we had a front row seat. I was running the New York Metro Stars, and we actually watched the towers crumble to the ground from our offices. And then all the aftermath of that, and then the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. You know, I broke ground on my second soccer stadium about 40 days after Lehman Brothers collapsed in New York. Not good timing. But this one is different. This one has got a much longer tail on it. I think it's more unpredictable. There's been so much uncertainty. But the one thing that I learned from the previous two global crises is that don't hide. Don't pull the cover over your head and just wait it out. be out in front. So one of the things we did when we shut the league down on March 12th was we went right to work. We went right to work communicating, doubling down on communication with our fans, with our sponsors, with our broadcast partners, and really kind of immersing ourselves in communication. We created 4 new channels on YouTube and social media. We created a nostalgic highlight series for fans who wanted to watch all the best games from the previous seasons. And we doubled down on the communication. None of us thought it was going to last this long. So we were trying to figure out a way to either finish the existing season, get a playoff in, crown a champion, everything what every other league was doing. But it just didn't make sense for us at the end. So we put a pin in everything and are now, and since really the beginning of July, have been focusing on figuring out a way to return to play. Obviously, health and safety for players and fans is number 1, number 2, number 3 priority in all of this. And we, based on our medical experts, our arena, our players who have a very close relationship with our players union, we feel that late first quarter is a time when we're going to go back to play. And we're very close to making an announcement on when we're returning to play.
Right.
John Mays is our Associate Athletic Director here at the University of New Haven. He's also the executive producer of this podcast. You had a chance to meet him before when we were chit-chatting before we came on the air here, Nick. He has a great question, and I'm curious to get your opinion, and I'm curious to get Dr. Z's reaction to this. And that is, Nick, with your background in building leagues and branding and expanding and league administration, what are your thoughts and what would your advice be to the University of New Haven as we attempt to go Division I and conference realignment in general?
I always go back to the next generation, and what's amazing about college athletics and the college scene is that you're responsible for the next generation. I would talk to them and get their feedback because they're the ones who are going to support your athletic programs. It's no different kind of than what we do. I'm a big believer in talking to your customer and, business. Lamar Hunt actually said this to me. He said, business is pretty easy. You just talk to your customer, find out what they want, build it, price it right. Odds are they're going to buy it. And, if I was in the college scene, I would be thinking about what that student athlete wants. Also, the alumni in universities are very important, and I'm not a millennial, but I'm alumni of the school. And alumni, I think, are extremely valuable. So in that sense, that constituency is important as well. But, a lot of times people think, oh, yeah, well, the students want this or my customer wants that, and I'm going to build it and they're going to like it and they're going to buy it. Well, that doesn't always work that way.
Dr. Z, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny. We've done a lot of these shows, way more than I ever thought we would. We just keep going, and it's one of the first ones where I'm trying to hide it. I'm taking notes. Those who are listening tell, but those who are watching, if they're, I've got some things going on here that don't hide. You can't schedule opportunity. You're responsible for the next generation. That's I'm just kind of taking notes here and learning. That's. I think you have to be a lifelong learner. It's a little bit of what Nick's saying. If you're going to grow, and you never outgrow learning, and the day you think is the day that the competition will catch you.
Very, very true. I've heard those words throughout my career, and actually, not to blow smoke at you guys, but started learning a lot of that stuff from my soccer coach at UNH. I had a couple of them. My professors there were pretty instrumental in ingraining some creative out of the box thinking, and that's lasted me my whole career. So it's very true. Those notes you wrote down were not some of my inventions. They were things that I've copied over the years and brought into my career. So copying the best is sometimes also really good and has served me very well.
I think very few of us have original quotes, and I talk to J.W. and Rob and John so much. I'll qualify it and say, hey, this is one of my only original quotes. It usually lands flat compared to the ones that I'm repeating. It's
Right.
waiting for him to jump on it. And, you got a couple,
Right.
but I'm waiting for him to repeat them. Nobody's repeating them. That's
Right. Right. Alex Ferguson once said to me, years ago, I met him, and I've been such a massive fan of him and that club and what they've done over the years in Manchester. He said to me, some of the best coaches in the world are thieves.
Mhm.
They're thieves. They take what other coaches do and make them better. And there's no shame in that, right? You take a strategy or a particular management tactic, and you just make it your own. You steal it and you make it better. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm going to go football on you here. When I was coaching at Wyoming, we hired an offensive coordinator who was a really good friend from the past, and he brought in a version of the run and shoot that he called the triple shoot, which is really a precursor to the spread. Then this is all part of the Mike Leach, Hal Mummy family, but it all goes back to Mouse Davis. These are all, you're naming off these soccer names, and this is a certain lineage of what you now see. You can't watch a football game without it. We thought we were really cutting edge, and I guess at that time we were. But now it breaks my heart that I'm watching a football game last weekend, and they're saying this is one of the few teams that still huddles. I missed the huddle. I used to be a running back coach. Well, I liked it when I had 2 and 3 running backs. Now you only have one, and sometimes you don't even have him. And the game's progressed. And where I'm going with this is, it all goes back to the Chiefs, right, J.W.?
Yes.
Watching, college game Saturday, and they do this underhanded shuffle pass for a touchdown. It was phenomenal. Well, the Chiefs had just run that 2 weeks before, and it's the first time anyone had run it that way. The shuffle pass is you do it like this. No one has done the Mahomes underhanded, while you're running the wrong direction. And he's changing the game. And now we've got the quarterback at Kyler at the Cardinals.
Kyler Murray.
It's a different game with him. And to his credit, he saw that, drafted him, and knew that he could. That offense is unlike any other. I mean, this guy's running for touchdowns as much as he's throwing for them. It's crazy.
Some of the best coaches are thieves.
Yep. And this almost ruined football coaching. Newt Rockne started watching film of his practices. So everyone else did. I've always told coaches of all sports, you work 24/7. Well, we only do what the opponent does. And if we'd all call a timeout and agree not to watch film or tape, we'd get back 5 hours a day. But Rockne started half of this stuff. It's on him. It's his fault.
Hey, Nick, we had a great time visiting with you. Thank you very much for being here. We know you're busy, but at some point, and when things settle down a little bit, both in your life and in the world itself, we'd love to have you stop by campus in West Haven. When is the last time you've been to campus? Do you know?
Yeah, I was probably there about a year ago. Met with the lacrosse team, and coach actually invited him to a Black Wolves game. So it was probably about a year ago. It's changed dramatically from the time I was there, but great memories up there. I can't wait to get back and visit with you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was really special.
Yeah, this is great.
You're welcome. Great. Nick, all the best to you. Thanks for joining us here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. We'll see you down the road.
You bet. See you soon. Take care, guys. Thanks.
That is Nick Sakiewicz, who is the commissioner of the National Lacrosse League, which is pretty incredible, Dr. Z, considering his background in soccer. Yeah. And as we mentioned, still holds or shares some school records for us here at the University of New Haven, is in our Chargers Hall of Fame. I think, there's a lot, as he said, there's a lot to unpack from his story, but it's phenomenal. I think there's great lessons in there for everyone to pick up. And as he said, he's an O guy. And as we often say, these are the perfect times to be on offense, right? We play offense. We don't play defense. And I think in the world today, especially in the business world, even though things are, to some people in a standstill, you don't sit there. You sit neutral. You don't go backwards. You play offense, right, Z?
As I said before, I took notes, and more notes than I shared with you here. I'm grateful to him for that. And I didn't know when we started interviewing him which direction we'd go, and it probably could have gone in a dozen other directions. But it went in the directions it was meant to go. And I know for me personally, the note about don't hide. We're all living through that, and this podcast is a way we're not hiding. And John's leadership seminars, and Rob's Career Connect seminars, and Robin's Diversity Alliance, and we're doing our best as a athletics department to get out there in front for our student athletes, for our alumni, and for the institution, and that just motivated me further. So I thank Nick for that. That's I put it up on my grease board along with the other quotes that I stare at every day.
You mentioned Rob Thompson. I want to bring out Broccoli Rob, our producer, real quick. And as you mentioned, he's so involved with, the career development portion for our student athletes. This year, we always try to give them opportunities. Rob, you've known Nick for a while. In terms of career development, what did you take away from what he said, and what are some of the lessons that our students and our student athletes can take away from our interview with him today?
Yeah, you never know where you're going to land when you get into your career. I mean, he was working for a bank in San Francisco. Who knew, I'm sure, that his career was going to take off from there just by chance of being asked to sit in another meeting that had to do with soccer. And then it evolved. So those who are looking for that career, especially in sports, you don't always have to take the traditional route through a team or through a league, because those are very difficult to get. But through a sponsor, through an agency, through a media side of it, like you, J.W, you never know where it's going to, or coaching like Dr. Z, myself through coaching, you never know where it's going to lead you. So I think he's a prime example, and he's a great example of the way that the university used to be back in the 70s and 80s. And all those great guys and men and women that came through, and all the national championships they played for. And I think that tradition continues today, that we're this little hot spot within there's a great little tree from ESPN to the NFL to NBA, to MLS and National Lacrosse League to the NHL. We're kind of everywhere through the league, and we're not Cornell, we're not Harvard Law School, but we match up with those guys of what kind of executives we pulled out of this place.
Man, Rob, you strung that together. You put some words together I don't know I could have pulled out of my brain, but you said it really, really well. As a newcomer on the block here, that's what people ask me about New Haven and what I've learned and what I like. Yeah, I talk about it all the time. But that's a piece that just blows you away, is the legs that this place has. And it's impressive. I haven't been many places that cut across so many different endeavors in the world of sports, in the world of academe, and otherwise. It's a special. I tell people we sit here in the elbow of the tri-state area, on the water. There's my plug for the beach, and people just don't know. It's our job to get that message out there, because it is a special place and has a rich history.
Well, you listen to Nick and you talk about the area. Geographically, we're lucky, close enough to New York City, right? And obviously with ESPN, we had Starter here from, with our own alum that came out from this area. But Nick being a first generation or second generation immigrant, immigrant parents, that was a lot of the story start there with our alums. Just from this area in general, that was a concentration of a lot of immigrants that do come in, and kind of us as the children and grandchildren of that generation. There's just a different DNA. Yeah. And I think it kind of, the stars aligned is probably the best way to say it.
There's an energy there. There's an edge, it's probably a lack of comfort, you keep working, you keep driving, as opposed to just expecting it to come to you because it was there when you were born into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you just, when you kind of, it's always us against the world mentality, and it just kind of, it carries over from when you leave into your career. You don't, that's why I wrote the book, How to Land a Dream Job If Dad Doesn't Own the Team. Your dad doesn't own a team, how are you going to get a job, in the sports industry? And you have to be a little bit more clever and savvy and practical and all those other things that, and I think UNH is epitomizes all of that.
Yeah. Yep.
As we say all the time, no sense of entitlement, and that's why everybody works so hard. And it's a tribute and a credit to everybody who has done that, including our alums, people like Rob and people like Nick, who've allowed us to branch out so much and be able to make these connections at places like MLS, NLL, NBA, NHL, NFL, and the list goes on and on. As always, Broccoli Rob, thanks for your time here, and thanks for getting Nick for us. We appreciate it. He was a great guest. As we sign off here on another episode, we just wanted to remind everyone that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and if you want to help in the fight against breast cancer, please visit pinkcloverfoundation.org. The Pink Clover Foundation does great work in that area, and they're our presenting sponsor here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. As always, we thank our listeners and our viewers for joining us. We thank Nick Sakiewicz, and we wish him the best of luck with the NLL. For our producer, Broccoli Rob Thompson, for executive producer John Mason, for Dr. Z, I'm J.W. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.